My sister demanded I cover $12,500 for her luxury birthday trip. She snapped, "Pay it. I'm not celebrating like some broke nobody." When I said no, Mom used my card details to pay the entire resort deposit behind my back. She smirked. "She deserves luxury. Stop being cheap." I didn't even get angry, because by sunrise, my sister was calling me frantically. The notification arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was sitting on the hardwood floor of my apartment, repotting a drooping fiddle leaf fig I had rescued from the shop's return shelf. The familiar grit of damp potting soil was packed beneath my fingernails, and my heavy forest green canvas work apron was still tied securely around my waist after a brutal 14-hour shift. When my phone screen illuminated the dark room with a silent notification, I wiped my dirty hand across my knee and tapped the glass, expecting a late delivery update from my wholesale supplier. Instead, it was an alert from my bank. Transaction alert, 12,500 cents. Resort Villana deposit, card ending 4418. I read the stark white numbers twice. My breathing remained steady, but a cold, heavy weight dropped directly into my stomach. I had not made a purchase in 3 days, and the very last thing I bought was a $6 black coffee at the corner bakery that morning. $12,500 was not just a number to me. It was 4 exhausting months of revenue at my flower shop, Bloom and Thorn. It represented hundreds of early morning trips to the wholesale market in the freezing cold, thousands of thorny stems stripped by hand, and countless weekends surrendered to setting up wedding venues while my peers were out enjoying their lives. And I knew exactly who had taken it. The exact amount staring back at me from the screen was not a random coincidence. Just 7 days earlier, my 27-year-old sister Olive had stood right here in my narrow living room and demanded that exact figure. She had shown up unannounced with our mother, Francine, trailing behind her like a loyal bodyguard. Olive had marched in, tossed her designer bag onto my cheap sofa, and unrolled a glossy brochure for a luxury coastal resort. She wanted a birthday trip. Specifically, she wanted to fly 8 of her friends out for a long weekend featuring a private suite with a balcony pool, premium spa packages, and a rooftop dinner. When I looked at the total and firmly told her I was not funding a vacation, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unfiltered disgust. "Pay it, Celine," Olive had snapped, her voice echoing off my thin apartment walls. I am not celebrating my birthday like some broke nobody in a rented apartment who spends her weekends arranging flowers for other people's weddings. I have been planning this trip for 6 months. 8 friends are going. You make $32,000 a year selling roses out of a shop the size of a parking space. This is $12,500. You will earn it back. I cannot unplan a birthday. Pay it, or I will tell everyone in this family that you refuse to do this one thing for your own sister. I had looked to our mother, expecting Francine to intervene and inject some reality into the conversation. Instead, my mother crossed her arms and glared at me with profound disappointment. "She has been working hard on this itinerary, Celine," Francine said, her tone sharp and reprimanding. "Stop being cheap. You have room on your card." I checked. Those 2 words had bothered me all week. Francine had my card details saved on her computer from an authorized purchase I allowed her to make for groceries 8 months ago when she was short on cash. I had explicitly told her to delete the information, and she promised she had. Clearly, my mother had kept the numbers, monitored my available credit, and handed my financial lifeline over to Olive because she decided my boundaries were simply suggestions. I did not waste time screaming into the empty room, nor did I dissolve into tears of betrayal. Years of dealing with their specific brand of entitlement had taught me that reacting emotionally only gave them leverage. Instead, I operated with pure, mechanical precision. At 11:52 p.m., exactly 5 minutes after the notification appeared, I dialed the 24-hour fraud department on the back of my card. The hold music played for 3 minutes before a representative named Marcus answered. I need to report an unauthorized transaction, I told him, keeping my voice completely level. A $12,500 charge was just processed for Resort Villana. I did not authorize this payment, and I am in physical possession of my card. Marcus typed rapidly on his end. I see the pending charge here, ma'am. Because the amount is highly unusual for your spending history and was keyed in manually online, we can intercept this immediately. I am freezing the card ending in 4418, opening a formal fraud dispute, and initiating a hard reversal on the deposit. Thank you, I said. How long until the resort is notified that the payment bounced? Since it is a high-value manual block, the merchant's payment gateway will receive the reversal notice during their nightly batch processing, usually around 4 or 5 in the morning. I hung up the phone. I did not call Francine to demand an explanation, and I did not text Olive to argue. You cannot negotiate with people who view your livelihood as their personal slush fund. I set the phone face down on the coffee table, brushed the remaining potting soil off my apron, and waited for the sun to come up. At 5:00 a.m. on Wednesday morning, the resort processed the bank's reversal. The deposit evaporated, and because their strict policy required upfront payment for luxury group suites, the booking was automatically canceled. At 6:18 a.m., my phone began to vibrate violently against the nightstand. The caller ID flashed Olive's name, accompanied by a picture of her posing with a champagne flute. I let it ring 4 times before I calmly swiped the screen and lifted the receiver to my ear. "What did you do?" Olive shrieked so loudly the audio clipped. The sound of her panic was thick and desperate. "Celine, what the hell did you do?" "The resort just emailed me saying the card was reported stolen and my entire booking is canceled. My friends have already booked their flights." I walked into my small kitchen and turned on the coffee maker. I reported a charge I did not authorize to the fraud department. That was my birthday. She screamed, her voice cracking with furious entitlement. "I told everyone we were going." "You ruined it. Mom said you had the money." "That was my card," I replied, keeping my tone perfectly flat. "And you do not have a booking anymore." I hung up while she was mid-sentence and immediately blocked her number for the next 24 hours. She needed to sit in the wreckage of her own choices. My sister fundamentally misunderstood what that money meant. When she looked at my life, she saw a target, but she had never bothered to look at the framed documents hanging in the back office of Bloom and Thorne. 4 years ago, I started this business with a terrifying $4,000 loan and a flimsy folding table at the Saturday farmers market. I spent years eating rice and beans, wearing thrift store clothes, and working 60-hour weeks until my feet physically ached just to secure a tiny commercial space above a dry cleaner. My annual take-home pay was $32,000. Every single cent of the $8,400 sitting in my savings account was accounted for, serving as a buffer against slow winter months and unpredictable wholesale flour costs. Olive had tried to erase 4 years of my blood and sweat for a single weekend of Instagram photos. She almost succeeded. In fact, if it hadn't been for a conversation I had 3 weeks prior, I might have actually second-guessed myself and called my mother first instead of the bank. 3 weeks ago, on a quiet Saturday afternoon at the shop, my assistant Tabitha and I were assembling a massive funeral spray. We were carefully weaving white lilies and soft ferns around a ribbon that read, "With love, the Hargrove family." The shop smelled deeply of fresh-cut eucalyptus and damp earth. Tabitha, who had been with me since the farmers' market days, tied a perfect knot in the ribbon and looked across the work table. "Your sister called the shop landline yesterday while you were at the market," Tabitha said casually, though her eyes were sharp. She asked me if we had a good month. I told her we had a very solid month because of the spring wedding rush. Olive just laughed and said, "Good. She can afford it then." She didn't say what it was. I had paused, my pruning shears hovering over a lily stem. I hadn't responded, but the warning bells had immediately started ringing in my head. Tabitha leaned forward, resting her hands on the steel table. Listen to me, Celine, when she asks for whatever it is, and she will absolutely ask, call your bank before you call your mother. Your mother will cry, she will manipulate you, and you will fold to keep the peace. The bank will not. Tabitha's warning was the exact anchor that saved my savings account last night. The hardest part to swallow was the betrayal of trust leading up to this. Olive had been acting noticeably different since January. She had started calling me once a week. She asked about the shop's foot traffic, and she even miraculously remembered the name of a stressed bride whose wedding I had designed in March. I foolishly thought my sister was finally trying to build a genuine relationship with me. I thought the distance from our last major argument had given her some perspective. I had even sent her $500 for Christmas because I genuinely believed her when she claimed she was turning a new leaf and starting fresh. I should have asked what exactly she was starting. She wasn't trying to bond with me. She was conducting an extended financial audit. She was grooming me to pay for her lifestyle, calculating exactly how much goodwill she needed to fake before dropping a $12,000 anvil on my life. But freezing the card and canceling the trip was only the surface level of the fallout. I was about to discover that this luxury birthday theft was not a spontaneous, desperate act. It was a highly calculated system, and it had been running right under my nose for over a year. At 10:00 a.m. on Wednesday, exactly 10 hours after the unauthorized deposit was flagged, I walked into the local police precinct. I was still wearing my forest green canvas work apron over my clothes, the bottom hem faintly smudged with green floral sap. The precinct waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. Across the metal counter, an intake officer named Detective Vance listened without interrupting as I laid out the digital transaction records, the bank's fraud dispute confirmation, and the matching text logs from Olive demanding the exact funds. Using someone else's saved card details without active, renewed consent to push through a 5-figure charge is not a family dispute. Detective Vance said, his pen scratching against the paper form. It's credit card fraud. He issued a formal police case number and handed me the carbon copy receipt. It felt remarkably light for a document that carried the legal weight of a felony, but as I tucked it into my apron pocket, I felt a sharp, cold satisfaction. The police report wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the anchor keeping my boundaries from drifting away under family pressure. The next morning, Thursday, I sat across the desk from Neville, a civil and fraud attorney whose office smelled of old leather-bound books and strong espresso. Neville reviewed the bank paperwork I handed him, adjusting his reading glasses as he scanned the timestamps. You acted correctly by hitting the fraud department immediately, Neville said, tapping a finger against the bank confirmation. Because you filed the dispute within hours and established a paper trail, the bank is legally required to back you. But since your mother was the one who initiated the charge using stored credentials from a past transaction, we need to look deeper. People who commit fraud on behalf of family members rarely do it just once. They test the system first. Test the system? I asked. Pull up your bank statements from the last 18 months, Neville instructed, sliding a clean legal pad toward me. Let's look for the small numbers. People focused on a $12,000 shock usually miss the breadcrumbs that led up to it. I unlocked my phone, opened the banking app, and began scrolling backward through the digital statements. My florist's eye for detail, the meticulous tracking of stem counts, wholesale delivery discrepancies, and invoice balancing kicked in. I wasn't just looking at money anymore. I was looking at a ledger of deception. And there they were, buried like broken glass beneath months of routine transactions. The first anomaly appeared in February, 14 months prior. A charge for 200 no cents from Salon Marquise, located 3 blocks from Olive's apartment. At the time, I had noticed the notification pop up on my phone while I was sweeping up rose thorns at closing. When I texted Francine to ask about it because the merchant name looked unfamiliar, my mother had immediately called me back. sounding flustered and apologetic. "Oh, honey, I am so sorry," she had gushed. "I accidentally grabbed your card out of my purse instead of mine when I paid for my routine touch-up. I must have mixed them up when we went shopping last week. I'll pay you back next week." I had accepted the excuse. I didn't want to fight over $200. The second anomaly appeared in May, 9 months prior. A charge for $350 paid directly to Apex Mobile, Olive's cellular carrier. When I questioned Francine about that one, she had sighed heavily, painting herself as the victim of a stressful household. Olive's phone was about to get shut off, Celine, and she was crying hysterically. I tried to use my card, but the chip reader failed. I panicked and used the card details I had memorized from that grocery run. I meant to ask your permission, but everything was so chaotic. Again, I let it go. I told myself it was just family helping family through a rough patch. The third anomaly appeared in August, 6 months prior. A charge for $175 from Fitcore Gym. I hadn't even questioned it at the time. I assumed it was another innocent mix-up, another clumsy error by a mother who claimed she couldn't keep track of her digital wallet. I stared at the screen, a bitter realization settling deep into my chest. They weren't mistakes at all. They were tests. Every single time Francine used my card without permission and got away with it without a real consequence, the system was reinforced. Each unauthorized charge was a dry run designed to measure my tolerance for financial bleeding. The $200 salon visit, the $350 phone bill, the $175 gym membership. Adding them up totaled exactly $725 in prior thefts. When added to the $12,500 resort deposit, the grand total of unauthorized extractions came out to $13,225. Neville looked over the highlighted statements, his expression hardening. "These aren't clerical errors, Celine. A mistake doesn't happen 3 times in the exact same direction, always benefiting your sister. This is an established pattern of ongoing financial exploitation. It elevates this from a single bad judgment call to a calculated long-term scheme." Neville drafted a formal civil demand letter laying out the total of $13,225, attaching the dates, merchant names, and bank logs, backed by the threat of escalating civil litigation and forwarding the evidence directly to the ongoing police fraud file. The trap was fully built. All that remained was for the family to walk right into it. On Saturday, day 5 after the unauthorized charge, Francine called what she referred to as a family sit-down. She demanded I come to her house at noon to resolve what she termed a massive overreaction on my part. She expected a guilt session. She anticipated a tearful reunion where I would fold, withdraw the fraud dispute, and apologize for ruining my sister's manufactured happiness. I arrived straight from the Saturday morning shift at Bloom & Thorn. I walked into Francine's living room, unknotting my canvas work apron and draping it over the back of a wooden dining chair. The house smelt thickly of Francine's cheap vanilla plug-in air fresheners and brewing coffee. Olive was already sitting at the kitchen table, her arms crossed defensively, staring at her phone. Francine hovered near the stove, adjusting the burner under a tea kettle she had no intention of pouring. They had staged the room perfectly for an intervention. Olive did not bother with a greeting. She threw her phone onto the table, the plastic case clattering against the wood. "You completely ruined my birthday, Celine. 8 of my friends are texting me right now, asking what happened to the booking. I cannot even show my face online. You humiliated me." Francine stepped away from the stove, her voice dripping with maternal disappointment. "We can fix this, Celine. You just need to call the bank, tell them it was a misunderstanding with my saved card, and have them process the payment again. Olive has been crying for 3 days. You are destroying this family over a trip." I did not defend my choices, and I did not engage with the guilt trip. I pulled out a chair, sat down, and asked the one question that triggered the trap. "When did you first ask Mom for my card limit?" Francine's hand froze halfway to the kettle. Her shoulders locked in place. Olive narrowed her eyes, feigning confusion. What are you talking about? I reached into my pocket, pulled out the folded bank statement Neville had reviewed, and slid it across the smooth surface of the table. 3 specific lines were highlighted in bright yellow ink with the dates circled in red. $200 in February for your salon visit, I said, pointing to the first highlight. $350 in May for your mobile carrier. $175 in August for your gym membership. All processed from my card using the details Mom saved without my permission. All processed months before the $12,500. Francine finally turned around, her voice lacking its usual commanding volume. Celine, those were genuine mistakes. I told you I mixed up the cards in my digital wallet. Mistakes do not happen 3 times in the exact same direction, Mom, I replied, keeping my hands perfectly flat on the statement. I looked directly at my sister. The smug entitlement had vanished from Olive's posture, replaced by a rigid, guarded panic. She pressed her thumbnail sharply into the edge of the wooden table. Cleo called me yesterday, I told Olive, watching her eyes dart toward the door. She was terrified because you begged her to front $5,000 for a new resort deposit. She also mentioned you confessed you have $28,000 in credit card debt and haven't worked at your marketing firm in 8 months. This birthday trip wasn't a celebration. It was a performance you were funding with stolen money to convince everyone you were thriving. Olive opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I turned back to Francine, delivering the haymaker. And you helped her. You have been running financial surveillance on me for years. You logged into the banking portal using the credentials I trusted you with. You checked my available balance. You verified my limit. You tracked my savings. And you fed every single number back to Olive so she could calculate the absolute maximum she could extract without bouncing the transaction. The phrase I checked wasn't a casual remark. It was a system. Francine stepped forward, her maternal mask slipping to reveal pure defensive anger. We are family. I birthed you. I raised you. You have the money sitting there doing nothing, and your sister is drowning in debt. You have always been so selfish with your little flower business while Olive struggles. I stood up, the legs of my chair scraping harshly against the linoleum floor. You called me cheap for selling roses, I said, aiming the words directly at Olive, returning the insult she had hurled in my apartment a week ago. The roses paid for this card. The roses paid for the $500 I sent you last Christmas so you wouldn't get evicted. The roses paid for the floral arrangement at your engagement party 2 years ago, the one you never even thanked me for. Cheap is charging $12,500 to someone else's name because you cannot afford your own lifestyle. I am your mother, Francine demanded, pointing a trembling finger at my chest. You will drop this dispute. I pulled the carbon copy police receipt and Neville's business card from my pocket, dropping them directly on top of the highlighted bank statements. You called me cheap for saying no, I told them, my voice dropping to a near whisper that filled the kitchen. The bank called it fraud when you said yes without my signature. One of us has a case number. Olive stared at the police receipt, her breathing suddenly shallow and rapid. The reality of a criminal investigation shattered the remaining illusion of her authority. She scrambled for a lifeline, attempting a transaction where she had no leverage. Fine, Olive stammered, her hands shaking as she pushed the paper back toward me. I will pay you back half, $6,250. I will borrow it from Dad, but you have to drop the police report immediately and tell the bank it was all a mistake. I tapped the paper with my index finger, refusing to take it back. The police report and the civil demand letter cover $13,225, not $12,500. There were 3 charges before this one, Olive, and I know you knew about all of them. Olive's eyes widened. She hadn't realized I possessed the full timeline, proving this was a sustained felony, not a single bad judgment call. This is the last dollar you will ever touch. the last card number you will ever see, and the absolute last time you call my shop a parking space," I declared, my voice echoing in the small kitchen. "If you want to reach me, call Neville." I turned around, picked up my forest green canvas apron from the chair, tied it securely around my waist, and walked out the front door. The financial cascade hit Olive exactly how an avalanche hits a fragile foundation. Once the bank finalized my fraud dispute, Resort Villana formally blacklisted Olive's name from their reservation system. Desperate to save face, she attempted to secure a smaller room block using a different credit card, but the transaction declined instantly. Because she had prioritized paying non-refundable deposits to a local photographer and a luxury spa package for the trip, she lacked the liquid cash to cover her own minimum monthly payments. Her $28,000 in existing credit card debt triggered a brutal chain reaction. A missed payment triggered a $39 late fee. That balance carried over, triggering a second $39 penalty, followed rapidly by a $78 default penalty rate adjustment. $156 evaporated in a single billing cycle. Her already dangerously low credit score plummeted from a 580 to a 541. The financial illusion she had spent months curating collapsed into a mountain of compound interest. The social fallout was significantly faster. On day 8, Cleo called Olive directly. "Did you pay for this trip with your sister's stolen credit card?" Olive immediately tried to spin the narrative, a tactic that had worked flawlessly for her entire life. "It was not stolen, Cleo. She said I could use it. And now she is just being spiteful because she is jealous." Cleo cut her off entirely. "Your sister filed a police report with a detective, Olive. That is not she said I could." Cleo withdrew from the trip immediately, and within hours, 2 other girls pulled out of the group. Out of the 8 friends invited, 3 were gone before lunch. The planning group chat, a thread containing 6 months of venue polls, dress code votes, and countdown graphics, went completely silent at 4:12 p.m. on a Wednesday. Nobody posted another message. It never recovered. By day 14, the isolation became absolute. It was late at night, and Olive sat alone on her apartment couch, the glow of her phone illuminating her face. She opened Instagram and scrolled through her own meticulously planned posts. There were the countdown graphics, the tagged friends, the photos of the resort infinity pool, and her caption reading, 28 and thriving. The post had 94 likes. Beneath it sat 22 comments reading variations of, "Is the trip still happening?" and "Are you okay? Haven't heard from you?" Olive typed out a reply defending herself. Then she deleted it. She closed the application entirely. The phone screen faded to black, acting as a dark mirror. Her own face reflected in the cold glass, but she stared at the hollow, exhausted expression, unable to recognize the person looking back. She set the phone face down on a couch cushion and did not pick it up for the rest of the night. The system was breaking apart from the inside, too. On day 21, my phone buzzed with Francine's number. I let it ring twice before answering. "I should not have used the card," Francine said. Her voice was entirely stripped of its usual commanding maternal authority. It sounded remarkably small. "I am not calling about the money. I am calling because I was wrong." She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't beg me to withdraw the civil demand letter or fix the fractured family dynamic. The legal reality of her actions had finally pierced her armor of entitlement. I listened to the quiet, ragged breathing on the other end of the line. I did not forgive her, nor did I explicitly reject her. "I know," I said. The call lasted exactly 44 seconds before the line disconnected. The contrast between our two realities was absolute. In Olive's world, the birthday trip was dead. Her credit score was a 541, heavily weighed down by late fees. Her Instagram profile had been dark for 11 days. Furthermore, Francine was no longer speaking to her. Because the formal fraud report named Francine as the perpetrator who manually keyed in the numbers, my mother was furious at Olive for manipulating her into committing a felony. The birthday designed to prove Olive was thriving had publicly and permanently proved the exact opposite. In my world, it was late April at Bloom and Thorn. The morning air was finally warm enough to leave the heavy glass front door propped open. The shop smelled intensely of fresh peonies waiting in the register buckets and crisp eucalyptus spread across the metal cutting table. I reached for my canvas work apron. It was forest green, with Bloom and Thorn hands stitched across the front pocket. The exact same apron Olive had sneeringly called that rag when she stood in my apartment and demanded my livelihood. I tied it securely around my waist. I began building the first arrangement of the day, a massive wedding centerpiece for a Saturday bride who had meticulously chosen every single stem herself. My assistant Tabitha was at the back counter, calmly pricing out the weekend delivery routes on her clipboard. The credit card on file in my wallet was brand new. The numbers were entirely different. The bank portal had a complex, multi-factor login password Francine would never be able to guess. My business savings account read exactly $8,400. It remained untouched because the fraudulent deposit had been forcefully reversed. It remained intact because I had drawn a hard line in the sand, and because I had spoken up to a bank representative at 11:52 on a Tuesday night while my hands still had potting soil caught under the fingernails. The shop smelled like something growing, vibrant and alive. I didn't need to call anyone to justify my worth or my boundaries. I picked up my pruning shears, caught the morning light filtering through the front window, and made the first clean cut of the day.